Good morning. Pleased to be joined with Vice Chair Ted Lieu. After we left our Democratic caucus meeting this morning, House Democrats start this September period focused on the most pressing concerns of everyday Americans. We've been out in our communities. We've heard directly from our constituents and neighbors and working families. They're concerned about building a stronger economy. They're concerned about bringing down costs, tackling gun violence, and restoring reproductive freedom in every state and in every community. That's why it's so frustrating to come back to Washington to see House Republicans threaten our nation's economic progress by doubling down on their hostage-taking politics. The leaders of the House Republican Conference have made their demands clear. Impeach Joe Biden without evidence, or we'll shut down the government. And we've seen this playbook before. Throughout the spring, Republicans said, cut Social Security or Medicare, or we'll lead to an economic default, risking the loss of millions of American jobs. House Republicans have done nothing on the economy or public safety by outright rejecting the president's emergency funding request. They are turning their backs on $800 million to fight fentanyl in our communities. They use it as a talking point, but when it comes to actually delivering, they're absent. Their only priority is to hurt Joe Biden politically and to help Donald Trump get reelected. This is a Donald Trump revenge tour that Republicans have signed on to, lock, stock, and barrel. The American people deserve more than that, and they can trust that House Democrats will continue to put people over politics and advance their interests first. Vice Chair, Ted Lieu.
Thank you. And I agree with everything that Chairman Aguilar has just said. We are here to try to prevent the government from shutting down because that would harm our economy. We want to make sure disaster relief goes to communities affected by disasters. And what are Republicans doing? They're trying to impeach Joe Biden with zero evidence. As an impeachment manager for the second impeachment, we had mounds of evidence. That's why the article of impeachment passed. And that's why we had a bipartisan vote of U.S. senators to convict Donald Trump. We could not get to 2/3, but there was a huge amount of evidence. That's in contrast to this impeachment, where there is no evidence whatsoever. And you don't have to take it just from me. Let me just tell you what Republican members of Congress are saying. Republican Representative Dave Joyce of Ohio recently stated that he is, quote, not seeing facts or evidence, end quote, that would merit an impeachment inquiry. Republican Dusty Johnson of South Dakota stated, quote, when it comes to impeachment, he has, quote, not seen that evidence, end quote. And then Republican Ken Buck of Colorado, he stated, quote, I don't think that evidence has been presented connecting President Biden wrongdoing, and that, quote, I'm not convinced that that evidence exists. So I call on the Republican caucus to stop following the lead of Marjorie Taylor Greene and instead do the work of the American people, which is to make sure our government does not shut down so that we don't harm American families.
Questions? Cool.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, Republicans in justifying this impeachment inquiry have pointed to former Speaker Pelosi, and they point to the fact that she didn't hold a vote initially as precedent for why they're not holding a full vote in the House. How do you respond to that?
Well, we did hold a vote in the full House, but just look at what Kevin McCarthy said 10 days ago. He said that this wasn't going to be done unilaterally by one person until the most extreme members of his caucus, until he has dinner with Donald Trump, until he huddles with Marjorie Taylor Greene to find out which direction he has to go. Then and only then does he decide that they're going to do it alone. And he goes back on what he said 10 days ago to start these impeachment proceedings. This is all about distraction and delays, but it is clear the motto for the Republican conference is no evidence, no votes, no problem. Just business as usual. That is who they are. That is exactly what he has done. By the way, I mean, this is a song that we've heard before too. You know, it took them about 10 days to back away from the agreement, the Bipartisan Budget Act agreement that Kevin McCarthy agreed to and signed on to. And then the most extreme members of his caucus said that they wanted to cut more. So they instructed appropriators to cut $100 billion more So I guess the question is, if every 10 days he's going to change his mind, what's he going to say today? And shouldn't we just wait 2 weeks and then see what the outcome might be?
So there is a pretty big difference, and I agree with Republican Ken Buck, who called this, quote, impeachment theater. And that's because this is completely impeachment theater. There is no additional power that the Republican Congress has because they simply call this impeachment inquiry. And that's because the Department of Justice under the Trump administration issued a ruling saying that unless there is a vote of the House, there is no additional power of the House for doing impeachment inquiry. So the Democrats took a vote of the House and we passed it. And that's why the Democrats were able to actually get additional powers to impeachment inquiry. There is nothing different from calling this impeachment inquiry versus not calling impeachment inquiry. It's exactly the same thing.
Just very quickly, this follow-up. So based on that ruling, would you argue that this inquiry is invalid? Or that of the DOJ opinion?
Kevin McCarthy can call it anything he wants, but it doesn't give any additional powers to the Republican Congress whatsoever.
Marianne?
Just to follow up on that, Republicans are claiming that because this is an impeachment inquiry, they have more tools to be able to investigate or subpoena. You've obviously served on the January 6th committee. That's different than impeachment inquiry, but Democrats have also have been involved in impeachment inquiries before. Is it your understanding that there actually are more tools? Does it really give investigators more powers of any kind? Because that's what Republicans are claiming. We're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and look, they're going to be wrapped around this axle for a while because they're kind of making this up as they go. It's pretty clear that they have no path, no objective here other than to carry former President Trump's political water. That's what this is about. What I can tell you is impeachment 2 that Vice Chair Ted Lieu served on for the January 6th committee. The common thread there was votes of the House in a bipartisan way. If you want to have success in this town, if you want to genuinely provide oversight and seek the truth, then a bipartisan show of support is how you do it. So you'd have to talk to the White House and the Department of Justice as to what powers that the Republican conference has with this inquiry versus a vote. That's not what we're here to discuss today. But what I can tell you is the American people see right through this. There is no evidence. There is no bipartisanship. This is strictly an effort by Marjorie Taylor Greene and the most extreme members of the Republican conference to guide Kevin McCarthy wherever they need him to go. And even then, they have said this isn't enough. They're already connecting the government shutdown, to this, because it will never be enough to the most extreme members of that conference. Nick.
So Republicans are trying to conflate the Hunter Biden issues with the impeachment and the president. Are Democrats going to try to separate the two, and will you defend any of Hunter Biden's conduct?
We will defend that there is absolutely no evidence of anything that is tied to President Joe Biden. High crimes and misdemeanors. There is zero evidence of anything related to the president. Vice Chair Ted Lieu just read quotes from Republicans themselves who have said that and have amplified that point. So House Democrats are concerned about the rule of law. We're concerned about where this goes because Republicans cannot be trusted as being truthful when it comes to this topic. And so this isn't about Hunter Biden. This is about President Joe Biden. And House Democrats will continue to talk about, his track record, his success. He is a decent and honorable person, and nothing that they have done has talked specifically about the former president. So they can call it an inquiry. They can do whatever they want. We are confident that President Joe Biden is doing what he should be doing for the American people, and that's what we're going to be focused on.
On appropriations, there's been talk of, are they talking about attaching disaster funding to Homeland Security bill, which is not expected to pass in the Senate? Can you speak to disaster funding?
It's pretty clear that Kevin McCarthy was playing whack-a-mole all of August. I mean, he is trying to answer the most extreme members of his caucus, and he is trying to find a path to hold leverage in appropriations. So he will do whatever impeachments, whatever inquiries he needs to do. He will cobble together whatever bills he needs to put together to try to count to 218. Coming into this week, they had said defense appropriations was the path, was the bill that we were going to work on. Next week was going to be Homeland Security. I sat through these hearings. I serve on the Appropriations Committee. These are really, really terrible bills that carry on the culture wars. They have no path and no chance of success in the United States Senate. This is just about speaking to his base and keeping a few people happy for a few more days. That's all this is about. So, I'll believe it when I see it. What packages come to the House floor, we will be ready. We will speak with unity in talking about how dangerous these bills are to our national security and the fact that Republicans don't want to vote on supplemental bills that will help the Ukrainian people fight for freedom or help us here secure our borders and provide additional support against fentanyl. Those are the types of things that we're going to talk about. So everything else, we will wait and see what this Republican majority puts forward and whether they have the votes to pass it. Anything else?
If things are stuck here in the House and the CR, have House Democrats spoken to any Senate Democrats about maybe the Senate going first with the CR to get the ball rolling? And if so, would it be doable to jettison, say, Ukraine and natural disaster aid and just a clean CR?
We're not going to turn our back on the urgent issues of the day. The Ukrainian people are fighting for freedom. It seems that many in the House Republican Conference want to turn our back on that conflict. They want to help Vladimir Putin, build an empire. That's what they have chosen to do. That's what 70 of them voted for, in fact, before we went on our August recess and work period. It's incredibly unfortunate. Leader Jeffrey's office is in touch with Leader Schumer. We have had, conversations among the bodies. We stand ready to both help the Ukrainian people as well as prepare and guard against depleting disaster revenue. The DRF, the Disaster Relief Fund, is on fumes between hurricanes and fires in Maui and in Florida, flooding in Vermont. We have seen that account depleted. It needs urgent attention, and it will. And so that's why we, expect and need urgent action. And so we'll work with our Senate partners. I think we're less concerned on timing and who goes first. We want to keep the government open. That's what the House Democratic Caucus wants to do. That's what, by the way, Senate Democrats want to do, and Senate Republicans. The only group that doesn't want government funded is the House Republican Conference. And that speaks volumes to where we are.
On the supplemental funding, are you open to the idea of voting on disaster relief separate from Ukraine funding so this becomes less of a partisan issue?
I think it's important that we have a focus on the continuing resolution on fully funding government, whether it's through a continuing resolution or passing full year bills. But our belief is we should act on, I share the position that Mitch McConnell has. We should act on disaster relief and Ukraine funding at the same time. These are both urgent. Timing matters, here in D.C. Separating bills and running, dual tracks, that takes time. I'm not familiar with the Senate process, but it seems like it takes them a few days just to turn the lights on. So, we'd like to keep things, moving and together. And I think that's why the president proposed this, $40 billion package when you combine disaster assistance with Ukraine. I think that makes the most sense. I think that's where House Democrats are. We see the urgent need in both categories and the importance of keeping government open. That is our focus, and that's what we're going to continue to work toward.
Last question.
Go ahead, Jackson.
Thank you very much. Would House Democrats be open to using the discharge petition mechanism to get through spending legislation, to go around Speaker McCarthy?
Yeah, We're aware of a lot of, different options. It was mentioned before, whether the Senate goes first, whether there's, discharge options. There's, what we are focused on is October 1st, we need government open. And we need reasonable partners on the other side of the aisle who agree with that. Unfortunately, there is a shutdown caucus over there. And many members of the Republican conference feel that this is in the American people's best interest to shut down government. Their objectives for the month have been very clear: shut down government, impeach Joe Biden, and maybe get rid of their own speaker. That seems to be all the oxygen in the room is around those three topics. Nothing to do with lowering costs for the American people, providing relief, creating jobs, record job creation under the Biden administration. That's what we're focused on talking about. Unfortunately, they want to continue to carry the former president's political water. We're aware of options. I would encourage you to talk to Rosa DeLauro. We're always willing to focus on what the future holds, as long as it meets our objective of funding government on October 1st.
You're not ruling out the.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.